This is Jordan Poyer, safety for the Buffalo Bills, and you are now listening to Cover One Buffalo Podcast. Let's go.
Good evening. Welcome to the Cover One Buffalo Podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, tonight in the sixth in our 2020 NFL Draft Series on the Buffalo Bills. Tonight on Oregon State wide receiver Isaiah Hodgins. And once again, I am joined by our friend from the Cover One Draft and many, many other areas on the interwebs that you see him, Mr. Russell Brown. How we doing, Russ?
I'm doing good today. How you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. And, you know, Christian and I dove into the receiver that the Bills took first, which was Gabriel Davis out of UCF in the fourth round. And I told him that when I was going to be going over Isaiah Hodgins with you, I said, I know they got him in the sixth round and all the way at pick 207, but I can't lie. I think I'm a little bit more excited about Isaiah Hodgins. And I don't know if that's just, you know, kind of my bias and that I did a little more work on him coming in. But, you know, I was shocked that he fell as far as he did. And I think he's the perfect example of, as people talked about this historic NFL draft class, and there wasn't the Julio Jones or the AJ Green kind of guy up at the very tippy top, but just that once you got into that guy, that there were arguments of who was seventh and who was 22nd, and you would have crazy range of people in between. And this is the kind of guy that I think in many other drafts could have been a third round pick, and that all of a sudden just gets pushed down with so many other guys. Tell the fans a little bit about what they can expect with a new receiver, Isaiah Hodgins.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of similar with the cornerback class, and Hodgins was a guy that I had as my 18th overall receiver, but beyond just that, he was my 112th ranked player, and I had him ranked higher than Gabriel Davis on my board. And that's not a knock on Davis. I'm like you. I liked Hodgins a little bit more. I thought he was very fluid for a player at 6'4", 210. He was, pretty fluid as just a route runner in the way that he, climbed in his routes, and he's got really good body control. I think he high points the football very well, and he tracks it very well. Plus his dad's James Hodgins, so he falls from the NFL family tree, if you will. And I think his ceiling, it's probably not as high as other receivers in this class. That's why he went where he went. But I think if you're looking for kind of a low-end productive receiver that can give you help on third downs and in the red zone, I think you get a guy like this with Hodgins. He's not a true speedster. He ran a 4.61, but again, he's got a 36.5-inch vertical, and he did the 3-cone drill in 7 seconds. So I think there's some certain explosiveness to his game, and it shows. And I'm excited about this landing spot for him. As far as a team that I think needed a future number 3 and number 4 receiver down the line. So I think he can develop well in this offense.
Yeah, and I think that, you see some of the measurables here, the full 6'4", I actually think he was 6'4" and change, 210, so not too thin from that standpoint, had the arm length and hand size you would expect of someone that height. But then also adding in, being that height and still having that kind of explosion in the vertical and the broad jump, I thought was pretty exciting to be able to see that and to put it together. And you see some of the guys that they comped him with. Obviously, you saw Michael Pittman, and he was right there in that idea of, some of those guys that got a little bit more attention in Pittman and Claypool. But when you were looking at those bigger guys, that's where all my attention was, because obviously the Bills trading for Stephon Diggs, having John Brown, having Cole Beasley, they had incredible footwork, great route running, great separation. And although Stephon Diggs is very good in the contested catch role, they didn't have that high point red zone guy to be able to go. So I was spending a lot of time on Antonio Gandy-Golden, a lot of time on Isaiah Hodgins, a lot of time on Colin Johnson, trying to find who's that guy that I think could be a value in this draft class, where after trading for Stephon Diggs, I didn't really want to spend that first pick in the second round on another receiver and invest all that capital. And this was a guy that I was excited about. And one of the things that really intrigued me, and, fans that saw that, for Bills fans that, we love an underdog story as much as any fan base, Duke Williams got a lot of attention last year. And that I think this is a pick that was a real shot to the heart of Duke Williams. And one of the reasons is, can you tell me, is it true or not true that Isaiah Hodgins has never dropped a football in his adult life?
I believe that is true. I don't think he's ever. I don't think he's ever dropped one.
Just when you see the numbers and the catch rate, and that, I think one site actually had him as 0 drops. I think another had him as 1 drop. But
it was around 1 or 2.
Yeah, where the judgment is on what it is, the fact that they're debating on whether it's 0, 1, or 2 is pretty incredible for the high. The numbers you're talking about in that Oregon State system.
Yeah,
you're talking about a lot of balls, and they have 86 catches, 1,100 yards, 13 touchdowns. I think 29 in the red zone, and to have that few drops and that kind of catch rate is an exciting proposition.
Yeah, no, and it just shows how well he attacks at the catch point and how strong he is at the catch point to be able to secure passes, whether it's in a tight window or just if it's draped in coverage. He's going to be one of those guys that I think figures out how to utilize his size and his length and the strength that he has. Cause he's not the strongest guy in the world, but he only had 9 reps at 225, but again, he's got long arms and he attacks well. So he understands, I think, the technique needed to win at the catch point, being that his dad was, an NFL pro for so long and learning probably from other veterans throughout the course of his life and just probably watching film at a very young age. So I think if you're a Bills fan and you see where they got him late in the draft process, like I mentioned, I had him 112th on my board, and my board's a little bit different just simply because you've got a lot of top level guys, and then you get to some of those day 3 guys, and once you get into pick 105 and really lower and beyond that, you get into those day 3 guys. So I did view him as a day 3 option, but I think it's a great value, especially where the receiver room's at right now. But I think in the long haul, where the receiver room's going to end up going, when you have guys like Brown and Beasley off a contract, you're going to need somebody to turn to, and I think Hodgins can be that guy.
Yeah, and I think people throw around terms like catch radius and things like that very generically and don't really understand where that comes from. And sometimes catch radius can be a guy like John Brown's ability to track the ball deep. Sometimes catch radius can be someone like Stephon Diggs' body control and footwork at the sideline. Isaiah Hodgins is more of the stereotypical traditional catch radius, in that when you have the hands that he does, with the wingspan, with the height, with the ability to high point, and that high pointing is so critical, because you take a guy, and I referenced some names earlier, you look at a guy like Colin Johnson, that it measures actually bigger than Isaiah Hodgins even, but just in film never played to that size. And you have a guy like Isaiah Hodgins where he would legitimately just, big boy guys, and he would just go up and be like, sorry, you can't come up here to get the ball. I'm going to go up over top of you, and you just can't do anything about it. And sorry, I already have the ball. The play's over. We scored. And just being able to do that against Division I cornerbacks and guys who are getting drafted now is just such an impressive ability to be able to go up and do that. And, you touched on it, that I think if he went to the wrong situation, where he was asked to run a full route tree day 1 or to go in and be some primary weapon right off the bat, I think he could get discouraged, could be disappointing, or seen as a poor pick. But the fact that there is such an established core ahead of him of really savvy veterans who, Stephon Diggs, for any of the other things that people talk about there, he's world renowned for his work ethic and how hard that he puts himself into the game. To be able to watch someone like that, to be able to, the way that John Brown carries himself, the time that Cole Beasley puts into his footwork, and if he picks up anything from those guys and adds that to his skill set, where he's able to slowly come along, they just get to use him in some of those, red zone situations, 4 wide situations, limited snaps, where maybe he's getting, maybe 10 or 15 snaps a game. But he's maybe able to make a presence on special teams early on. Maybe he's able to get in some other areas. I think that's exactly what you laid out, that maybe in time, we're excited about this year's receiving core, but Brown and Beasley are both over 30 already. And that you need to be prepared for it. And bringing in guys like Davis and Hodgins, where obviously Diggs is 26, and I think we have a nicer run with him. But being able to pair that, I think that Hodgins is a guy that Bills fans are going to be really excited about in the future going forward, even if it's only maybe a couple glimpses this year.
Yeah, and I just looked up, his drop percentage, because that was bothering me. It was only 1. So, he does catch everything. And, he had he had 123 targets this past year, and 93 of them were catchable. He caught 86 of them, and he only had one drop. So 13 touchdowns, almost 1,200 yards. And, you mentioned him bringing that presence as a special teams guy. I think that's certainly going to happen. And when we talk about the work ethic of guys like Stephon Diggs, I think that's something that's going to benefit him because he'll get to pick the brain of one of the best route runners in the league. And that's what Stephon Diggs is. And you're going to be able to pick his brain. And that's an area that he needs some refinement. He needs to get better as far as being a route runner because he didn't run the route tree. But again, the production, it's there. He catches everything. And when we talk about guys, and you mentioned this, guys like Colin Johnson who just skyscrape and just one up guys at D1 corners. Well, another guy that did that was T. Higgins, and he was the first pick of the second round. But T. Higgins didn't have the vertical, and he's the same size as Isaiah Hodgins. He's, maybe a little bit thicker, and he's certainly got, probably better body control. But he did not have the same vertical. I mean, Hodgins had the 36.5 at the pro day for Clemson. Higgins had 31-inch vertical. So he was very underwhelming, where Hodgins had a good combine and he had a great season. So I think if you're a Bills fan, you need to really look at this in the kind of the microscope of, okay, year one, I'm going to set the expectations low. Year two, I'm going to kind of raise them up a little bit. But I think by year three, you could see a low end, at best, wide receiver 2 to complement Diggs, but more than likely, he's probably a wide receiver 3, and I think that production's going to be pretty good in this offense.
Yeah, it was funny that in his press conference, he had talked about that he had a pretty impressive setup on one of his double moves. He kind of did one of those sluggos where they were asking him how he got, and then he said it was watching film of Stephon Diggs, and that's where he kind of mimicked himself after. And I think some people have brought up some of the things of, maybe not the most refined handwork at the line to get off a press, maybe some things that he needs to work on as far as, he ran a lot of go routes and a lot of jump balls, a lot of back shoulder fades and things like that. And that there's not a ton of refinement beyond there. But honestly, in that first year or two, they probably don't need him to do a whole lot more than that. That's probably going to be what they're going to ask him to do is, hey, we already know you know how to do this. We're going to ask you to do that a couple times a game. We're going to ask you, to be able to contribute in some of these other areas. He's not going to have it easy. You're going to be talking about guys where, Robert Foster, Duke Williams are going to be literally fighting for their NFL lives, to be able to show what they're capable of. So he's going to have to come in and show himself. He's not going to be given anything. And a 6th round pick is certainly not a guarantee for a roster spot. But I think that I've had some fans think that they're going to hide him on practice squad or things like that. And I don't see that. I think he is going to be on this roster and is going to be a part of this offense going forward. And it'll be a niche role early on. But this is a guy that I'm excited about, and it's certainly something to be able to watch in the development going forward. You had brought up T. Higgins. That's actually a really good comparison from my standpoint. And I'm not saying they're equal, from a prospect standpoint, but if you hid the jerseys and showed their highlight reel, you'd have a hard time picking out which one was which one was going 33rd and which one was going 207th. There's an awful lot of similar plays, similar style of play, and similar production when you watch the two of them.
Yeah, and I mean their frames are a little bit different as far as height and weight, and just overall their the lower body and just upper body, just physically one looks thicker than the other. I'm going to call it what it is. And Hodgins, though, I mean, it's similar, I think, in a sense, as far as if you saw him running next to like a Michael Pittman, you'd be like, wait a minute, am I watching USC or am I watching Oregon State? But yeah, they like, and that's the thing that I think was so different with this class was you had your Pittmans, your Higgins, your Hodgins. You had so many guys that were so good at tracking the ball, finding it in the air, and plucking it out of the sky. And that's something that you don't get every year. You get a lot of speedsters. You get a guy like Henry Ruggs who flies down the field, and maybe not that fast, but you get your Jalen Riegers and you get your KJ Hamlers. It seems like those are like a dime a dozen, but these guys were very different this year, and it was very effective to see what Hodgins was able to do. So, I mean, if you're a Bills fan and you think of like just production of a guy that, we talk about Higgins in the play style. Well, Mike Williams for the Chargers was 7th overall pick. similar play style, very similar as far as good body control. And again, I'm talking play style. I'm not saying pro comps or anything. So before anybody starts commenting on this and going, hey, he's comparing him to a seventh overall pick, that's not what I'm doing. But if you were talking maybe future production and future statistics, I mean, Mike Williams had 49 receptions this past year. So he's starting to take the steps in the right direction. And I think that's something that if Hodgins can get to that 40 to 50 catch range, that's a home run, especially when you're talking about a guy where he was taken. So I think I like this pick a lot. I mean, it's probably one of the better day 3 value picks that nobody's really talking about. So I'm happy that we got a chance to talk about.
Yeah, and I agree. This is now the 6th in this series, and just one more with Dane Jackson and the UDFA's coming up here. But honestly, one of the picks I'm the most excited about going into camp, and a guy that I'm excited to see compete. And that the fact that from 2 seasons ago, the Buffalo Bills receiving core was Kelvin Benjamin, Andre Holmes, Jeremy Curley. Now it's Stephon Diggs, John Brown, Cole Beasley, Gabriel Davis, Isaiah Hodgins, Isaiah McKenzie, Robert Foster, Duke Williams, Andre Roberts. 3 or 4 of those guys aren't even going to make the roster.
Yeah.
And just what Brandon Beane has turned around in 2 years is just unbelievable to be able to add that much talent. And, obviously Bills fans are very hopeful that we're going to see Josh Allen take a material, noticeable step forward to take advantage and capitalize on this talent that they've added. But in order to be able to do that and be able to find out what they have from a franchise quarterback standpoint, you have to surround them with talent, and you can't ask for a lot more than what they've done to be able to put this together here. So any final thoughts for Isaiah Hodgins, for this draft class as a whole, and what we've put together here from the overall standpoint of these players and what Bills fans have to look forward to, and where they can find you on the Twitter machine?
Yeah, just to follow up and kind of put a bow on it as far as him being like that vertical presence. Sports Info Solutions, SIS, they've got him listed with 8 targets as far as fade routes go. And he had 6 receptions on that, no drops, 80 yards. And he had 4 touchdowns on that. So I think that kind of goes to show, for a guy that had 13 touchdowns this past year, it kind of goes to show that this is going to be kind of his bread and butter early in the league and maybe throughout the course of his career. So yeah, like I said, I think he's certainly a high end wide receiver 3 down the line, maybe a wide receiver 2 at best. But I'm excited for his development. If you're a Bills fan, you should be as well, because I think it's very promising the way that they've kind of built this thing up to put some weapons around of kind of just a blend of everything, from a route runner to a possession guy like Beasley to a vertical threat he's a great route runner himself, and John Brown. And then you've got a guy like this and Isaiah Hodgins. And then you got your physical guy and like Duke Williams and your speedster and Foster. So I think the way that they've built this thing, they've kind of got a little bit of everything. So it's exciting. So Hodgins should work out. I don't think he's a practice squad guy, like you mentioned. I think somebody's going to steal him if that's going to be the case. So find me on Twitter at Russ NFL Draft. I really like this draft class as a whole for the Bills, for the players that they got. Tremendous value, a lot of upside. And that's all I got.
Awesome. Appreciate it again. Make sure you guys are checking out the Cover One Draft Show, following Russell on the Twitter machine, following Christian, checking out everything we have going on. You have been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.